Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing on with the AR-15 Buyer's Guide video series. We have already done videos on barrels, bolt carrier groups, receivers, handguards, other stuff that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, weapon light selection. All of those have already previously been done, and they've already been done both on YouTube, Rumble, my channel's there, as well as with additional information over on Mug Club. For folks that don't know, Mug Club is a place where creators can create exclusive content that isn't permitted in a lot of cases on YouTube. Like in this video, we're going to talk about stocks and some other things. We're going to actually show how to install them, which YouTube doesn't allow, for example. So it's myself, Steven Crowder, Brian Callen, Nick DiPaolo, who are all professional comedians, much funnier than I am. And they talk about lots of stuff that isn't gun related. I'm kind of the resident gun guy as of right now over there. But you guys, if you want to sign up for that content, that is exclusive over there. Code Mr. Guns and Gear will get you guys a free month. And you can sign up at the website on your screen here. So with all of that out of the way, today my goal, if we get through it, depending on time and the weather, because storms are rolling in, is to talk about AR-15 stock selection, AR-15 grip selection, AR-15 buffer system, and I think that should do it for today. We might get the triggers. We'll see how time goes. All right, so stocks, right? Let's talk about how we started out. So we started out the AR-15 stock, or the M16 stock, with this length right here. This is a fixed position stock, and this is what you would find on the M16A1 and some of the earlier prototype rifles like this one is here. This is the clone of one. Most of them, of course, are gonna be black, but again, it's a clone. So some of these were issued in green like this. But A1 length stock, let's talk about some things. Number one, it is A1 length, as the name would indicate. A2 length will extend a little bit, which we'll talk about, and then of course we moved on to the M4 system, which is a collapsible stock. We will get to all that here in just a second. Some pros of it: does have a sling swivel mount. Con of it is that the mount is here on the bottom, so it can create issues when actually using that sling position versus some of the more modern top mounted ones. And of course we're going to talk about aftermarket stocks as well, but we want to get through the military ones so you guys can see kind of where it came from and then just how much better we have it today with modern options. That said, the A1 and the A2 are still very viable stocks in my opinion, but the A1 uses what's called a rifle length buffer system versus a carbine length buffer system. So most of you out there who own AR-15s, I would be willing to bet that probably 90 to 95% of you guys own carbine length buffer systems, which is exactly what it sounds like, a carbine or M4 length versus a rifle length. So the systems are different, they're not interchangeable. So that is one thing that you need to know. If you end up getting a rifle, depending on what you hear here and what you use. If you end up getting one with a carbine length system, you need to use carbine length parts. Same is true with rifle length systems. You need to use rifle length parts. Okay, so this is our buffer right here. This piece goes like this. This is a carbine length buffer. This is a rifle length buffer. So you can see they are distinctly different, both in weight as well as length. Additionally, the springs are different as well. So again, you guys can see the spring here. If we line just the springs up, the spring on the rifle length is longer, has more coils to it. So if you have a rifle length buffer stock, you need to use a rifle length system like this versus a carbine length system. So just getting that out of the way, we'll get into buffer selection here in a little bit. Stay tuned for that. But just so you guys understand the terms that I'm using, I wanted to show that. So this uses that rifle length one. So it uses the longer system of the two. Definitely are pros to that. Generally speaking, rifle length buffer systems, just like as we talked about previously with gas length systems, rifle length buffer systems, just like rifle length gas systems, tend to give a softer shooting experience, so less perceived recoil when you're shooting it. So that definitely is a pro to it. There are ways you can alter your recoil experience with the carbine length buffers, which we will definitely get into in this video. So yeah, that's where we started out with, was the A1 length, and you can see here, when shooting it, this is kind of how it looks in my shoulder pocket. So it's not too long. But if we were to add body armor or something like that into the equation, it would get a little bit awkward and I would have to blade my stance in order to properly use it. So that is the A1. Then we moved on to the A2 length system, which in my opinion, for most folks, was kind of a step backwards. I understand why they did it, but I think it was kind of stupid in hindsight, and I guess we'll explain why. So the A2 versus the A1, let me just grab them and show you side by side so you can see exactly what the difference is in terms of length. So there you have it. It's right about an inch in terms of difference in terms of length there with the A2. And what tends to happen is obviously most soldiers are average height, right? That's kind of just the rule of average. So this was definitely developed for prone shooting. And most people, when shooting from the prone, did find this length to be a little bit more comfortable, give you a little bit more reach to get out there with your arm. You weren't so scrunched up like you were with the A1. So I get why they did it. But if you're talking about shooting in a dynamic environment, like moving through a city, for example, or inside of a house, having that up and having it farther away from you, pushing the weight forward of the rifle, for most folks who aren't 6'5" and taller, it's probably not the best for that. That said, for prone shooting, it still is absolutely one of the best stocks in the world, in my opinion, for that actual application. If you look at like high power competitions, Camp Perry, for example, just another one. If you look at those competitions, which are long range precision type competitions, you will see the majority of folks still using this type of stock. In some configuration, they generally alter it a little bit, but you'll still see them using A2s predominantly. And the reason for that is it's just very stable. It's very steady. It also uses that rifle length system. So recoil a little bit softer. And just before I kind of move on from that, I know a question that somebody's already typing out in the comment section. Can you put a rifle length buffer system on your lower on a carbine length upper, meaning one without a rifle length gas system? The answer is absolutely. You absolutely can, and you can do the inverse. You can put an M4 length buffer system or a carbine length buffer system on a rifle length upper. In fact, lots of militaries around the world have adopted some configuration of those two. Canadians, Danish, lots of folks have. So it's been relatively common. The Brits have as well. So yeah, you absolutely can do it. It'll run reliable. You don't need to worry about anything with that. The A2, of course, added the trap door here in the rear, so you can open it up, stick stuff in there like cleaning kits. But you know, of course, in the military, everyone puts like candy in there and stuff like that. But yeah, you can put extra batteries, whatever you want in there as storage. You'll see our sling attachment point is still there at the bottom, and that's just crappy for pretty much every type of use, but that is the A2 system. Then, when the military moved on and adopted the M4 series of rifles, they went to this stock right here. So this is adjustable, as you can see there. Again, we'll show you how to take these off and remount them over on Mug Club, because YouTube is YouTube. But this was your basic M4 stock. So back here it had some checkering to it. It did not have any type of quick detach point, which we'll get to here in a second, but it did offer this piece here, this little cutout in it. And what that allows is for the sling to go through it. A strap sling goes through it, and you can actually top mount your sling. And generally speaking, there's not a whole lot of scenarios I can think of where you wouldn't want your sling to be top mounted, but that was a huge improvement for using slings. Reason for that is if you use this sling point here, your rifle tends to invert when you're wearing a sling. Whereas if you use a top mounted system, it lays naturally as you would want it. So that was a big improvement for that. Additional huge improvement for a lot of people was the ability to actually change out your length of pull. So while this for me is very scrunched up and tight, if you are a 5'2" woman, for example, this is probably where you're gonna keep your buttstock at for the majority of folks. But of course, this one here is a Colt. So it's actually a 4-position receiver extension, but most of your current ones are going to be 6-position, and we will show you guys that here. So this is what that receiver extension actually looks like. And if I can move forward here, you guys can see 6 different positions where the stock can be adjusted to. Additionally, it does have a drainage hole at the rear, so that way if you're out in the rain or anything like that, rain can drain out and your rifle isn't full of rain, which is not what you want it to be full of. So it does offer that as well. But Colts originally came with 4. Nowadays they do come with 6. So that is your carbine length system. And like we talked about, that uses the carbine length springs and buffers. So these ones here. So your actual receiver extension here was shortened up a little bit. Now, the pros of that was exactly what I just talked about. You can change the length of pull on your stock, meaning how far in and out it is, which is huge. Additionally, though, one of the cons that came with it, if you look at like the military testing that was done in terms of reliability on the M4 versus the M16 series, you do lose a little bit of reliability. And it's not because of the buffer system primarily. It's primarily because of the actual gas system that's happening up here in our rifle. We shortened up the gas system on it, and what that caused is the rifle to cycle faster. And whenever not whenever, generally speaking, on an AR-15, when your AR-15 cycles faster, there's less time for everything to happen. So there's less time for the magazine to push a round up, for example, before the bolt comes home, and there's less time for just everything that happens in the action to happen, the bolt to unlock and relock into place. So whenever you, on an AR-15, generally speaking, speed it up from the original M16 speed, it just can cause more malfunctions. I'm not saying this is an unreliable gun, because it absolutely isn't, but compared to the rifle length gas system guns with the 20-inch barrels, there is a little bit of a loss of reliability. Again, it's not my opinion, it's actually documented data. You guys can check it out. So that's the military options. Now, to this day, they're still issuing out those M4 stocks that you guys just saw right now. They come with rifles that are being issued in the military right now, but there has been a revolution since the global war on terrorism in terms of stocks, accessories, etc. So before we get into that, I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and it's a fun one. So this is Infinity targets here. As you guys can see, they're malleable. The cool thing about these is that unlike steel, which is what I typically shoot, you can shoot these things up close and personal, as you probably see me doing in some footage that I'm rolling in right now. I mounted it on the ground for this footage because it's summertime in America, and you know how things are in summertime in American cities. So we're just training for that right now in the video that you guys just saw. But what's cool about these is you can shoot these things up to 110 times per square inch per target, and it self-heals up. This one obviously has been shot. Then you just spray paint back over it, and you go back to work, and it will show you where your hits are. And basically you can set it up on a piece of wood, wood stand with some clips, and you're good to go. So Infinity targets, thanks for sponsoring the video. They are cool. I do like them. I do like the system. Now let's get into some commercial offerings. So Magpul was probably the first big name in the game that came out with different stocks that were available for the carbine length system as well as the rifle length system. In this video, we're going to focus primarily, with one exception, on ones that fit on adjustable systems. So the M4 system, the carbine length system, you'll hear me use that term interchangeably. It means the same thing. So this is the Magpul MOE stock. It's probably the most common aftermarket stock made on the planet for AR-15s. A lot of companies use this as their standard stock. It's very good. Compared to the original M4, it definitely gave you some benefits. So as you can see here, they added some sling attachment points to it that I will show you here, if we can move in. So all the sling attachment points are these little slits right here in the stock itself, and unlike the M4, it gives you 2 additional points, and then additionally the top mounted portion is higher up in the actual sling itself, which again, with slings, that's generally what you want. Additionally, our lever here is enlarged, so it's just easier to hit versus the M4 stock, and the MOE has a better butt pad system, in my opinion. Offers rubber to it, which one thing that's nice about that is that it's just a little bit more comfortable on fabric, and when it actually recoils, it doesn't dig into you as much as that hard plastic on the M4 did. And really, all around was just an improvement overall. It still collapses all the way down, as you can see here on your receiver extension. And the reason that's important for folks that don't know is that a lot of times with AR-15s, particularly if you get what's called a bolt override malfunction, in order to clear it, you don't have to. One of the ways to clear it is to smash your gun with the stock collapsed into the ground. It's called mortaring the gun, and pull down on the actual charging handle at the same time. That will clear that malfunction sometimes. But it is something that you want it to do. You want it to be able to collapse all the way down, because if you had it out here and you're smashing it into the ground and you do it at an angle, you can actually break your receiver extension. So that is a feature that, generally speaking, you want to look for in stocks, is the ability to collapse all the way down. Now, one thing this stock was lacking that a lot of the next generation, I guess you could say, of stocks added to it was a locking feature. So you can see here, hopefully you guys can see that, that stock moves around a little bit on the actual receiver extension here. So the next generation of stocks, we're going to go with Magpul first. We're going to go through a couple different brands to kind of show you the thought process behind the stocks. We're not going to go into every stock. I think I probably have every Magpul stock, but we're not going to go into them today. But I'm going to show you sort of their next generation. So those, I have no idea on the date. I'll roll it in when the MOE stock came out. Their initial fix for it was a stock called the CTR stock, which is a great stock. People still love it today, even with all the modern options out there. The CTR stock was basically the same stock, but it added a locking lever to it. But modern ones don't need that. They actually built in some tension devices into the stocks themselves to, I guess, compensate for that. And so on this particular rifle here, we have this stock right here. This is the Magpul SL stock, and we also have it right here for your viewing pleasure. So it's got some advancements over the MOE for sure. So number one, if you take a look here at the angle of the stock, for the first time we have this little toe right here. So this toe on the stock that's kind of inverted in, if you guys are actually watching, if you watched the Mug Club Gun Week series, we actually talked about this in the long gun series because it came into play when I was trying to teach Gerald how to shoot an AR-15 over there. Because one thing with AR-15s that a lot of new shooters do when you hand them a rifle is they will take it and they will typically mount it like this, low, and then they'll try to turn their heads into it. And as you can see, this is not super ergonomic. This is probably not how you want to shoot a rifle. So in the standing position with the AR, typically we're going to mount the rifle pretty high, so that way we have to minimize how low we have to bring our head to it. And the reason and the way you do that is by using the toe of the stock right here, kind of in the top of your shoulder. It's kind of counterintuitive, but trust me, when you actually do it, it's not bad, and it's much easier to do than that. So they curved the toe in to make that more comfortable, give you a little bit more surface area on your shoulder to spread the recoil impulse around. Obviously, we still have the rubber butt pad, which is nice, but we really improved how we were mounting slings to this one. So this one came around after the advent of the QD system for slings. So right here on the stock, we have this point that can be accessed from either side. So again, this is actually fully ambidextrous. Our lever here, which allows you to move it in and out, is ambidextrous. It's on both sides. It gives you both sling attachment points here, just like the previous one did, but it also gives you this, which is the ability to run a quick detach sling on there. So obviously we just have a single point out here for example, but it allows you to put it in just like that very quickly and then remove it. Very, very handy system. And in my opinion, I know a lot of guys still like strap slings to this day. Me personally, I don't. I much prefer the QD system. And one thing that you sometimes want to look for, or probably always really want to look for, I can't really think of an exception to why you wouldn't want this, is some sort of anti-rotation device. So you can see the way Magpul does it is, not on this stock, not on all of them. On this stock, they actually use the body of the stock itself to prevent rotation, because this swivel can only move so much before it actually hits the body of the stock. And what you don't want is, you don't want a stock that, I can't do it, but because the way the design of this is, but you don't want your stock to just be able to spin like this in the QD socket. It's just not good. You can get tangled up. There's a lot of bad things that can happen. You don't want it. It's not a huge deal, but if you're looking for, selecting the stock that you want, one that has some sort of mechanism either into the QD system itself, like i.e. the cups right here. Some of them have built-in stops into them, or like I just said, the body of the stock on this one stops it from spinning. So this one here, kind of a very good all-around option. You could use it for precision type guns. You could use it for smaller type guns, lightweight builds, but Magpul saw the demand signal and decided to make other offerings for that. So not just Magpul, other companies did. We'll get to them here in a second. And they came out with the K stock, the SLS, and many, many others. Again, we're not going to get into all of them, but I want to show you some options so you understand the thought process behind it. So this is the same stock that you guys just saw there, but in the K configuration, K meaning Kurz, which generally means short in German. So you guys can see there, it loses some features while gaining some features. So the features that it loses, of course, is the quick detach point that we have here, and it also loses one of the sling attachment points. But what it gains is it's lighter weight and it's a smaller overall profile. So what people typically use these for is for quote unquote PDW, personal defense weapons, or if you just want like a lightweight build. So some folks like to make the lightest weight AR-15 out there, and if that's the case, then the ounce or two that you save versus the SL on the SLK here will come in handy, but everything else is exactly the same on that one. And one thing going in the opposite direction that Magpul and many others do is build a stock like this. This is the SLS, which is virtually identical to the SLK in terms of the dimensions that you guys see here. The difference is going to be when I turn it. You guys can see there what we get. So it's a little bit wider on there. And as a general rule, I am speaking in huge, vague, broad categories on this. People typically like these stocks for like this with a little bit wider of a cheek weld for guns that are going to be primarily shot from the prone or seated or kneeling position rather than the standing position. Now, it's not to say that you can't do prone, seated shooting, etc. with the other stocks. It's just that if you're going to be spending a lot of time with your cheek on the actual stock, some people, myself included, but not everyone, do like a little bit of a wider cheek piece on there. It just feels a little bit more comfortable. The con of that, of course, is just that it's bigger overall. It adds a little bit of weight. But one of the pros it gives you is virtually all of them offer this piece right here, if I could get it open, which is something that your thinner stocks simply can't do. So what it does is it gives you the ability to store things in your stock, like batteries or whatever the case may be, just like the A2 stock did. So same type of principle on that. And of course you guys can see there, it's O-ring sealed. So that way water and stuff like that will not get into there, but it's not obtrusive. It's not gonna break or anything like that. It's very slim, very sleek system. It gives you some storage options. Additionally, one reason I should say, that you might want, just when picking out a stock in general, you might want more weight in the rear of your gun is for balance reasons. So certain guns, particularly just off the top of my head, piston guns, are very front heavy, meaning they have a lot of weight out front. And one thing that can make it feel lighter, if that makes sense, or more balanced is probably the better way to say it, is having a little bit more weight in the rear. So if you take one of these stocks, maybe put 4 batteries in there, really add some weight to it, it will make the rifle feel more balanced. Now, I realize I just said add more weight to your gun, and a lot of people who own AR-15s are like, no, we want our AR-15 lightweight, which I get, I agree. But if you think about night vision, right? If you're running night vision in the front of your helmet and you don't have a weight on the back of your helmet, your head's gonna do that all night long and you're gonna have a sore neck when you wake up in the morning. And the same is true, not so much of the sore neck, but in terms of just the balance that you want, to not have to fight the rifle as much, to have to fight it up front if you have a bunch of weight up here. If you add weight in the rear, it does make it a little bit easier to handle the rifle overall. So that's one reason a lot of people would go with a system like this. Now, some other companies that have done very similar things and that are good options that I do think you guys should look at is going to be B5 systems. So this one right here is their stop mod stock. And then this one here is their B5 Bravo stock. Very similar, you guys can see there, similar stocks overall, but slightly different profile. And the B5 stop mod stock is actually a military issued stock. So this is going to be one of those stocks that is quote unquote mil spec. And you know, we have our lever here to adjust it. We have our QD cup in there. And this one, unlike the Magpul, is a good example of what I was talking about, that some of the actual QD cups themselves have built-in stops. This is one of them. So this does not rely on the body of the stock to stop it from spinning. It actually won't spin because there's actual little detents in there that prevent it from spinning. So that's how they do it. They're not using the body of the stock. As you can see, the body is not interfering with it, but it is unable to spin. Again, in my opinion, that is what you want. So, yep, you just stick it in there and it will not spin on you. Additionally, we do have the spots there to add batteries. On this one, you pull it out from the front and you can add your batteries in there or whatever. Skittles, whatever you want to put in there, you can put in there. And then of course we still have our sling points here at the rear and at the top if you want to mount your sling on the top, which a lot of guys do. And a lot of guys who know what they're doing like to do it that way, in my opinion. So yeah, B5 systems, very, very good stocks. One thing I should mention, we talked about different lockup mechanisms that are inside the tube here. And there's one in here that's a friction piece. One of the reasons that you want that over your MOE stock or even your M4 stock that rattles around, number one, people will say they don't want their guns to rattle because they don't like the way it feels. I get that. From a performance standpoint, it doesn't matter at all. What does matter is the impact tests. So the military has done a lot of drop testing on all of these stocks that I'm pretty sure all of the stocks that I have out here today actually have been through that drop testing procedure. And a lot of stocks that I'm not showing you will fail it. And one of the reasons they fail it is the stocks that don't lock into place. When it impacts the ground on concrete or something, it just gives it momentum when it moves, if that makes sense, and will cause it to break. The stocks that lock up tighter don't have that initial movement before the shock hits. So that is something to talk about. But yeah, it's something to look for rather, is that ability to not move. So this is the B5 Bravo stock. This one just recently was awarded some military contracts as well, but very similar to the SOP mod, but just thinner in profile overall, a little bit more compact. Doesn't quite have the toe that some guys like, the angled toe there on the bottom, but this is a super, super popular stock. Another company that has taken a very similar approach is going to be Bravo Company. So you guys can see this is the BCM gunfighter stock right here. Pretty balanced overall in terms of the amount of cheek rest that you get on there. Size, it also has the quick detach point that you guys can see there. And on this particular stock, the quick detach point has that curve built into it right there that you can see. That's what prevents it from spinning around on the swivel. And of course, still has our ability to mount your sling in there if you guys are using a strap sling. This one uses a very different system for adjustment. And this system for adjustment also is the way that they clamp it onto the actual receiver extension. So your BCM stocks are some of the tightest lockup stocks on the market. Like if you want something that locks up tight and will do insane in a drop test, BCM stocks are some of the ones to look at. All the ones we're talking about here today are very good, but BCM's drop tests are legendary. You guys look around the internet, people have done some insane testing with these stocks and they do very, very well. But this is their baseline stock that I'm showing you right here. And then on their guns that are oriented more towards like a designated marksman role or something like that, a precision type role, they offer this stock right here. As you can see, wider cheek piece on there. You're kind of seeing some themes to it, right? Wider cheek piece on there. And then they offer this piece that comes down. And that is for when you're shooting from either prone or from a chair. Some guys like to use their hand right here to stabilize the gun and make small movements. I'm making gross movements for the point of this video, but make small movements into the action of the gun if you have it rested on like a tripod or something like that. So that's what that's there for. And again, a stock like this with a little bit more mass is oriented for a precision type of gun. This one came on the Recce 16 that you see right here. I have a review of the gun if you want to see it, but very, very good stock as well. So those are the stocks. We're going to leave it there for now. I realize there's a ton of other stocks out there on the market, but we're trying to get through everything here for time. So let's get into grip. Getting into grips, we're going to start out with where we came from again and then get into where we are. So we started out with the M16A1 grip. One thing to note, there is no finger bump here on this one, and note the angle of it. So definitely more swept back than what you're going to see on more modern guns. And the reason for that is, again, this rifle really was designed mostly with shooting from prone position in mind. So when you're shooting from prone, that is a pretty natural grip angle. When you're shooting standing up, you kind of want to do more like that to keep your elbow down and in, versus from the prone, you're out like this. So that is why it has that sort of aggressive grip angle to it. And that was the M16A1. And then of course we went over to the M16A2 grip, which in my opinion went backwards in every way. It just sucks. It's stupid. It's similar in terms of angle. It's the same, rather, I should say. But it has these two finger bumps on there, which I suppose is great if it fits your hand, but I really don't know anybody that it fits their hand. I don't know what hand size you would have to be for that to be where your fingers would naturally fall. And of course, again, shooting even from a standing position, it's a little bit awkward and will put stress on your wrists that other modern options will not do. So getting into modern options, once again, you're going to see a theme here that Magpul kind of led the way on this. So the most, by far, and it's not even close, the most common grip out there on the market, aftermarket grip, is the Magpul MOE grip. So this was their original grip that they came out with in lots of different colors. Obviously we have it in black here. So what it did, of course, it went away with that stupid finger bump. It also made it a little bit bigger because the A1 grips here are small. They are not a big grip. I have an A1 grip somewhere. I think I lost it. Oh, there it is. So just to do a quick size comparison, there is the A1 grip versus the Magpul grip. You can see the Magpul grip is simply just much larger and it's just more comfortable all the way around. It's much wider as well. But you guys can see there how they sit in my hands. Everything about the Magpul grip, the MOE that we have here, is just superior. That's all there is to it. I don't know that anybody will argue with you on that. That said, I do have some guns that have the A1 grip on it, and I haven't changed them out. I don't have a huge problem with the A1 grip. A2 grip I disdain, but the A1 grip is just fine with me. And a lot of times with my A2 grips, I will literally just take the Dremel and ground off the top finger groove and kind of leave it as is. But of course, a lot of the aftermarket ones that we have today are just way better. So out here today, we have a couple options that we're gonna go over, but rest assured, there are a ton more. So this is the Bravo Company Gunfighter grip. And what you'll see here is a couple things I've changed on this particular one. Number one, if we take, there you go, that is the difference that you would see in the grip angle when mounted. So it is a much more vertical grip in terms of up and down. Additionally, we have some other things going on here. We have this piece right here that interfaces, let me move up so you guys can see it. We have this piece here that interfaces with the lower receiver so you can get your hand as high as possible on the grip, which is what you want to do. It's just like a pistol in that regard. Have a consistent high grip every time you grip the gun. We also have some storage here in the bottom. So this piece opens up and you can store batteries, Skittles, whatever you want in there. On this particular model, BCM also has this little tang right here, and what that's for is to keep your finger from rubbing up against the trigger guard that would be on a standard mil-spec rifle. And it prevents a blister that you will get if you are shooting a standard rifle all day long. That blister will occur, and I'm just going to show you here what I'm talking about. So here on your standard M16A1, your hand is going to go up against this piece right here that, as you can see, is in no way smooth. That is not a smooth piece. So if your hand is doing this all day long, you're gonna get a big old blister on your knuckle. Ask me how I know. So what they did here with this grip, not all BCM grips have that, but this one does, has that piece right there, which is where your hand is gonna sit. It's much more comfortable overall. And once again, when we are in the standing position, typically we don't want our elbow out. We want our elbows in because it's less area for someone to shoot at. And in this area, in this position rather, the hand, as you can see just on my wrist, is in a much more neutral position. It's not like that. Like that would put more stress on my wrist. So the more vertical grips, I don't think I know anyone that doesn't like a more vertical grip. Even guys who shoot predominantly from the prone prefer that more vertical style. Again, I can't think of anyone that I know that would disagree with that. So that is one option out there on the market. Another one here would be this Magpul grip here. This is the K, and it has a few things going on. It has these ridges on the back and the front, which some guys like for a little bit more texture. Additionally, this is a rubber grip. So this is actually rubber over molded, and just like the previous BCM one that you saw, it has this back strap here, which keeps your hand off of the lower receiver, and it's just a much more comfortable, more consistent grip position, as you guys can see there. Also has the storage in the rear. This is the K2 rather, I should say. I think I said K, but it has that storage there in the bottom as well, more vertical. Just a good option all the way around. Moving over to the B5 systems. Again, all of these companies make a ton of different options. We're not gonna go through all of them, but I just wanna show you examples of things to look for. But here we have the B5 systems grip. They make one that is really aggressively textured, which is this one right here, which is awesome. And it's more vertical as well. Additionally, has that tang right there, but does not have anything that extends forward into the trigger guard. On this particular rifle, which is a Smith & Wesson lower, not an issue because it has an integral trigger guard. So there's no uneven surface like you guys saw with the M16A1. So on this rifle, it makes perfect sense to not have that forward mounted piece of polymer like you guys saw with the BCM. But this texture here, super, super aggressive. You guys can see it actually caught some dirt and it just stayed in there because it's so grabby. But very aggressive surface. I personally like it. Pretty much with any kind of grip, I like a lot of aggressiveness. I know some people don't. Now they actually make one that is not aggressive, and I think I actually have one right here. That, just to show you, it's the same grip, just without all the aggression. And that would be this one right here. So exact same grip, just no aggressive texture. So for whatever you personally prefer, there is an option for you. So those are just some of the options in terms of the actual grip on the rifle. One thing to kind of keep in mind is that not all, like when you get into like billet lowers, not all of them will fit. So ones that will fit on pretty much I'd say 95% of lowers are going to be ones that have an interface like this. So it has an interface like the M16 grip. So you can see here the actual part that's interfacing with the lower receiver is quote unquote mil spec. So there's no tang that's going up too high. This Magpul one actually goes back a good bit, so I don't know of any lowers that it's going to interfere with rather. But it has a nice squared off front to it versus like what we were just talking about there with that BCM one. This BCM grip that has that forward mounted piece. Additionally, the tang on this one versus the Magpul. The tang is just the piece that I'm talking about right here in the rear. You guys can see, I'm not sure if you can see, but with the Magpul, it goes back further, and that's to avoid any interference with billet lowers. The BCM here isn't going to work on a lot of billet lowers because of this tang here. Additionally, it's not going to work on a lot of billet lowers because of that extended piece. On your quote-unquote mil-spec lowers, it will work on all of them just fine. So if you guys actually, it's a good throwback to the previous video we did where we talked about lower and upper receivers. One of the reasons I said most of you guys are going to want mil-spec lower receivers is because parts interchangeability. That's a perfect example of it. If you wanted something that's going to have that little finger stop and something that's going to have that really high, tight tang, with a billet, you're kind of limited. With a mil-spec, you're not. I just glanced at my watch, and I think the last thing we're going to talk about in today's buyer's guide video is going to be buffers, just for time's sake and consumability sake. So buffer system. So I pre-disassembled this one off camera so we could show it to you. So basically for the carbine length series that we're going to talk about primarily here, this is your carbine length buffer. As we were just talking about, we've showed you it works with a, you guessed it, carbine length spring. You don't want to use it with a rifle length spring. So basically it has this roll pin right here that is driven through this piece right here that holds this polymer piece in place, which is also colloquially known as the buffer of the buffer, if that makes sense. So that is a rubber / piece of polymer. Then we have this aluminum housing here. And then I'm gonna try to show you so it makes sense here on camera. We have these little buffer inserts in there, right? Hopefully you guys see that. So those are steel, those steel inserts right there. And they're separated by spacers. And so I'm gonna kind of dump them out here on the table and show you. So a standard steel buffer looks like this, and I'll roll in here on the screen the weights of the different H1, H2, H3. So this is the steel buffer that goes in there. There's 3 of them. This is a tungsten buffer that goes in there optionally. And the only difference between a a carbine buffer, which is what this one is here. Typically, when I say carbine buffer, it's going to not have any sort of markings on there. This one has the Palmetto State Armory marking on there, but it doesn't say H, it doesn't say H1, it doesn't say H2, it doesn't say H3, which we'll show you here in a second. That lets you know that you can expect it to be carbine weight in terms of the actual weight of the system overall, and that just means it has 3 of these steel buffers in there versus a tungsten buffer that we have here. Steel, tungsten. All right, cool. So that's how they are made up. And then the different variants that you will see out on the market are going to be these ones. So we have a H buffer, and I do want to thank Brownells for actually sending these out for this video, because they sent out all 3 of these just for this video to show you. So we have an H buffer that weighs a little bit more, and the reason it weighs a little bit more than a carbine buffer is because it replaces one of those 3 steel buffer pieces that are in those metal pieces. It replaces one of them with a tungsten one. So it has 2 steel, 1 tungsten. That is H buffer, or H1. You'll see it marked sometimes. We have this one here marked H2. Hopefully you guys can see that if my camera will focus on it. H2. And that means of those 3 buffers that are inside of there, it has 2 that are made out of tungsten and 1 out of steel. And then we have this one here, which is the H3 buffer, putting it over 5 ounces overall. And again, all 3 of them in an H3 buffer are going to be tungsten. So that is how it works in terms of the actual buffer weights. So what does that mean, and why do you care, more importantly? So with the carbine length system, a lot of times, especially if you have a short barrel, shorter than 16 inches in many cases, or you're using a carbine length gas system versus a mid-length gas system, or you're using super hot ammunition, or if it's really warm outside, or if you're bolt is really wet and well lubricated. See, there's a lot of things that go into how an AR-15 operates, but all those things play a role in how fast the bolt will cycle. So if your bolt is cycling really fast and you're getting a really abrupt recoil impulse, and typically, not always, I need to do a video on this specific topic, but typically if you're getting ejection, like shooting out at the 1 o'clock position, so right now you guys are at 12 o'clock to me, 1 o'clock would be there, 2 o'clock would be there, 3 o'clock would be there, 4 o'clock would be there, right? Does that make sense? Ideally, and that's a broad overstatement, ideally you want your ejection to be somewhere at the 3 to 4 o'clock position. That means your rifle is cycling at a speed that the AR-15 likes. It likes to operate like that. It's not going too fast, it's not going too slow. Your brass is ejecting consistently at that 3 to 4 o'clock position. Life is good with your AR-15, right? That's kind of what you want. Now, it's not always what you want, but generally speaking, that is what you want. A lot of military rifles will be slightly overgassed, and that is just for reliability. So that way, if the rifle gets gummed up, it's not very clean, it has a bunch of dirt in it, or it's really cold out, it's able to sort of power through those conditions. So a lot of military rifles will actually eject at the 1 or 2 o'clock position. What many of us would consider in the civilian world is that to be an overgassed gun, and we would want to tame that recoil a little bit. The easiest way, there's other ways, the easiest way to do it is by adding weight to your buffer. Now, I would say that, you know, the mil spec, if you will, up until the M4 carbine, like a lot of the XM177s that were out and some of the other predecessors to the M4, the mil spec was to have a carbine length buffer. Once we went over to the M4, we went to the H buffer as the standard. I think that's a good idea. I think that just about any operational environment, the H buffer is kind of where you want to have your starting point. Unfortunately, a lot of commercial rifles ship with a carbine length buffer, or excuse me, carbine weight buffer, and that's just for cost. The carbine weight is just the cheapest to produce. Tungsten costs more than steel, so there you go. That's why it's going to come like that. So as a general rule, if you're going to like upgrade something on a rifle and you don't want to go crazy, if your rifle came with a carbine length buffer, then throwing a tungsten piece in there isn't too hard. It just requires a punch, and you'd actually put it in there. And generally speaking, it will smooth out the recoil impulse of your rifle. And again, the way you would know that is either by looking at it. If it doesn't say anything, you can just assume it's carbine weight. Additionally, you can put it on a scale and see if it's carbine weight. If you don't have access to the scale, you can disassemble it and see if all of the little buffer pieces there, if they all weigh the same thing, then just rest assured it is a carbine weight buffer, because trust me, if there were 3 tungsten pieces in your buffer, they'd be advertising it. They would tell you, it would say H3 on it, because they would be able to charge you more money. So that is how it works. Again, that's how you adjust it. Now I'm using the example of ejection pattern. It's not really that simple. It's an oversimplification, but let's just say hypothetically you went from a carbine weight buffer system to an H3 weight buffer system, and now you're ejecting at 3 to 4 o'clock. And like right now, it's probably, I don't know, 80, 85 degrees out here. And I took a rifle that was ejecting at the, 3 to 4 o'clock position in warm weather like this with a nice, clean, and well lubricated gun, went out to Alaska and it's negative 20 degrees out and the rifle is dirty. And then I went to fire it and the rifle might not cycle because of that weight. So again, you kind of have to take everything into account. If you guys live in Florida and you're never going to go anywhere that's cold, then you probably don't really have to worry about it. But if you live in a state that's sort of in between, like you live in New England where it gets hot in summer and cold in the winters, it's something to think about for reliability. So just kind of know that going into it. And kind of the way I would look at it in terms of setting up your system, if you're going to do that, is you want to kind of think like the military in that regard, right? So you want to have a slightly overgassed rifle in warm conditions, so that way you know it's going to operate well in cold conditions or when your rifle is really dirty. There's 2 more things I want to talk about here before we close the video out here on YouTube and Rumble and move over to Bug Club, and that is going to be, again, the rifle length buffer system. So obviously, again, longer spring, and the buffer itself is heavier and longer. So like I was talking about, they're generally speaking smoother. For sure, the thing you give up is that if you go with a rifle length system, you give up the adjustability. So the actual receiver extension, which is this piece here, doesn't have all these different clicks in it. It's just smooth and there's no adjustment. So just know that that is one of the downsides of going with the rifle length system, even though there are upsides. Of course, just like your carbine buffer, you can drive this pin out, pull this piece out, and start replacing the actual buffer pieces to make it heavier if you want to. That said, most people really don't, because what they find is with a rifle length gas system, it's so smooth you just don't need to. So that is one of the advantages of the rifle length gas system. So it has pros and cons for sure. Then the one thing I want to talk about was precision type stocks. So there are ones that fit on both systems. So this particular one is the Magpul PRS. And it's one of the better ones. If you don't care about weight, it's probably the best one actually if you don't care about weight. It's a heavy stock, but it's awesome. So why would you want a precision type stock? Well, number one, they're going to be tighter, but yet they still give you adjustability. When I say tighter, I mean like stronger. One thing I mentioned earlier about the A2 stock, and the reason a lot of people still use it is it's just so darn sturdy. I mean, you can beat people to death with it if you wanted to, and that's kind of what we want, right? So you want that kind of durability. But the PRS stocks from Magpul, and there's other companies that make these as well, B5 Systems makes one, that will either work on the rifle length system or the carbine length gas system. Depends on the model. Just check it out. So that option is available either way, but ones like this will give you the ability to change your cheek height. Like if you're using a higher optic, you can do that. This one here also allows you to adjust the length of pull with this wheel here. You can adjust it out there, as you can see, and locks into place. This one has the steel reinforced QD sling mounting system. Also has our QD sling mounting system, steel, again, up front. Just a very, very durable, hard use, precision type stock. So if you have a gun that you know is going to be almost exclusively shot from a either prone or like a sniper hide or something like that, where you're going to be in those types of positions, these types of precision AR stocks are something to look at. One of the pros and cons of it is that they tend to be heavier by a lot, like not by a little bit. But of course that can be a pro if you want to balance it out. Like for example, this is an AR-10. We're not talking about AR-10s today, but this fits on AR-15s as well. But on an AR-10 where it tends to be overall heavier in the front, particularly with a barrel like this one, having that weight in the back does help settle it out. So I just wanted to talk about precision type stocks that are adjustable, because they do exist for AR-15s. So I want to throw that out there. But the PRS and they now have a PRS Lite, are just really good options. Again, there's other companies that do make precision type stocks that are adjustable but are fixed, if that makes sense. So the base of the stock itself is fixed, but it has some adjustable features as well. Really good. Another con of those is they are not cheap, versus like the Magpul MOE that we talked about in the beginning that kind of started this whole thing. You can find Magpul MOE stocks right now for 20 bucks probably. If you look for sales, that PRS, like times 10. So they're much more expensive, but they're really good. It just depends what you want, depends on the role of your rifle. So with that, we're gonna close it out here on YouTube and Rumble. Again, we're gonna continue this video over on Mug Club. We're gonna talk about some recommendations, drop links to deals on these stocks. Additionally, we're going to talk about how to modify these types of things. And of course, we're going to take viewer chat questions and answer some of the questions that you guys have been posting along over in the series. If you guys want to sign up, again, there will be a link here on the screen for you guys to sign up. Also a direct clickable link in the description. Additionally, if you guys aren't following me on all my various social media sites, you can do that down below at the links on your screen. Twitter's been fire lately. Telegram's been fire. Really love those two for sure. And Twitter has been mildly censoring my content. Telegram doesn't censor it at all. So those are great places to follow me if you guys want to see deals on stocks or anything like that. They will be over there, as well as any sort of updates. Like if I break one of these stocks, we'll throw it up on social media and let you guys know so everybody can laugh. But there is that. Additionally, guys, if you like this video and you're not subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you've done that, just double check, because folks get unsubscribed all the time. And if you're not seeing 2 to 4 videos in your display here as you look at it, either on your phone or on your computer or whatever the case may be, if you're not seeing 2 to 4 videos from me every week, then somebody is blocking your eyes from my content through an algorithm. So to prevent that, you can sign up for my email at the website here on your screen. It goes out every month. It has all of the videos since the previous month's email went out, so that way there's nobody censoring your eyes from my content. Additionally, any of the deals, in addition to being up on my social media, will go out in my daily deals email. It's fire. I have a virtually 0 unsubscribe rate because everybody likes it, because if it's in that email, like a stock, an optic, ammo, whatever the case may be, it's the cheapest that item is anywhere on the internet that I know of. So it saves you guys some time, because I've already done the price comparisons for you. Also hopefully saves you some money as well. And there's usually a pretty good meme in there as well, which folks tend to like. So with that, piss off, YouTube.